Just a note that this podcast may touch on difficult themes and include some challenging conversations, so please take care when listening. This is The Widow Diaries, a podcast that holds space for the often unspoken stories of grief, love and life after loss as a young widow. I'm Caroline Winter, and like so many, I've been on this journey. So come with me each episode and hear from others who've also walked the winding path of widowhood in their own way. The Widow Diaries, for First Light Widowed support, where no story is the same and every story matters. I didn't realise the power of time and the intensity of milestones when I was widowed, but I soon learned the symbolism of firsts and lasts, of birthdays, anniversaries, death dates and all the rest as the days, weeks, months and years went on. Richard and I were married on New Year's Eve, you see, which is a fabulous night to tie the knot, unless, of course, your person dies, in which case you handle that date with kid gloves for the rest of your days. How we cope with anniversaries and milestone dates are a huge part of being widowed. It's not always the day itself that's the hardest, but the lead up or the aftermath can sometimes be worse. And it's not always the big days that catch you out, but sometimes the seemingly insignificant ones. In today's episode, I'm joined by Jodi Carpenter. She also married on New Year's Eve, and her connection to that date runs deep. She's a second-generation widow, a mum to two amazing humans, and a newly minted grandma. Her story is one of layered grief and remarkable resilience. Her husband Chris died at 54 from brain cancer. But Jodi had already known the heartbreak of loss early in life, losing her dad when she was 11 and watching her mother widowed at just 38. And she has some wise words for how parents can help their children through the darkness. Jodi, thank you so much for being part of the Widow Diaries. It's really great to talk to you.
I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having a chat with me.
Well, let's begin with your story. How did you and Chris meet, and how would you describe your relationship?
Okay, so Chris and I met New Year's Eve, 1992. My cousin had arranged for a group of friends to go out for New Year's Eve, and we instantly disliked each other. It was definitely not love at first sight, but 2 weeks later it was my cousin's birthday party and we met again, and that time there was some sort of sparks, and by the end of the night I'd said to her, well, if Chris wants my phone number, back in the days of landline phones, feel free to give it to him. I only found out from her recently that she actually forced my number on him, going, you need to call her. And he was like, oh, okay. So he called me 4 days later and we went out on the Friday night, and by the end of the Friday night date, he was like, what are you doing tomorrow night? And I'm like, nothing. So he's like, can we go out again? I'm sure. Within 3 months of that, we were living together.
Oh my goodness.
After our second date, I actually had gone home and said to my mum, this is the guy I'm going to marry.
You'd gone from absolutely no spark to this is the guy I'm going to marry in
the course of about 3 weeks.
That's amazing.
Yeah. One of those things where you just meet someone and actually have time to sit and talk to them and connect and go, we want the same things. We see the world in the same way.
And so give me an idea, what was Chris like? What sort of guy was he?
He was the least Aussie male you could ever come across. Even though he was a tradie, he came from a poorer background, worked really, everyone in his family, he's one of second youngest of 6 children. They've all worked so hard to achieve in their own areas and do amazingly well for themselves. But Chris was just a stubborn go-getter, the most giving, loving man. Would do anything for anybody, literally give them the shirt off his back he hated to see anybody struggle or go without or do without. So if there was anything he could ever do for somebody else, he was out there doing it.
And this was the man that you had decided you were definitely going to marry. So what happened after those first few months? How did your relationship develop and you moved in together?
It was, I don't know, we just started spending more and more time together. I'd moved back home recently after sharing with friends, and my mum was moving interstate, and I said to Chris, I think this is a good idea. I'm either going to go and rent a place by myself, but I think it'd be much smarter if I moved in with you because I'm already here 3-4 nights a week.
Financially, it makes sense. I mean,
and he was. It was hard for him. He'd left home at 16. He was 26 at the time and had always lived alone for 10 years, and he was terrified about having someone else come into his space. But everything just always felt right. Like every step that happened, it just felt right for both of us. It was just like, so, a year to the day after we first met unsuccessfully, we got engaged.
So New Year's Eve, you got engaged?
Yeah. So we met New Year's Eve, got engaged New Year's Eve, and then the following year on New Year's Eve we got married.
Oh my goodness.
And that was partly to keep things easy for him because he could not remember. He could remember numbers of everything, tax file numbers, driver's license, birth dates, anniversaries. No, the man had no idea. So it was to keep it easy, and also when he proposed, one of his sisters straight away, because we were actually over in Melbourne visiting with his family and that, they're all excited, when are you going to get married? And I went, look, to keep it simple, I think we should just do it on New Year's Eve again. And one of his sisters went, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard in my life. And me also being very stubborn, put my heels in and decided, well, that's it. That's when we're getting married.
In that case, exactly. Draw up the invite. So there is definitely a golden thread through your relationship of New Year's Eve. And as it turns out, my late husband, Richard, and I also got married on New Year's Eve because it's a great night for a party, right?
Exactly.
Unless, of course, it doesn't pan out the way that you think it's going to. So what does that date mean to you now?
It's gotten easier over the years. We're coming up 5 years. The first year, it had only been 3 months since Chris passed. And that was hard because, everyone else is out. New Year's Eve is that time, almost a rebirth time, where everyone sort of resets and goes, these are my resolutions for the next 12 months and how much more spectacular are the next 12 months going to be for me. And I think especially the first year, it was, I don't see a future. How do I have a future like that? But it's still a hard thing, but it's gotten easier, the acceptance and I guess my own growth in being able to move forward with my life. I think also, because Chris died from brain cancer, unlike it being an accident or something out of the blue, we'd always had time to, I guess, talk about different things. And he was very determined as to how my life would look after him. So
Chris wasn't well for quite some time. How precious was that time then between, before he did die?
Amazing. So he was diagnosed with brain cancer on his mother's birthday, the 23rd of June, 2013. His mum had actually passed 6 months before I'd met him. So that was another thing that we'd sort of connected on was my dad died when I was 11. He'd just lost his mother. That we were probably closer to those parents each. So that was like a very strong connection point for us. But his next eldest brother had actually passed from brain cancer 16 months earlier.
Oh, my gosh.
So when Chris was diagnosed, we already knew what the future held for us, or thought we knew what the future held for us. And the doctors had given him a year. We got 7 years.
Oh,
and we made every second count, every second count. We travelled, the blessing that our children were 7 years older and had that extra time to get to know their father as teenagers and young adults made, I think, a massive difference. Well, it did, certainly for me, having been in my children's shoes and losing my father, knowing that they were going to be that much older and they'd be able to remember more and know more and ask him more. But, yeah, we definitely took advantage. But we always had. I think it was a really big thing having lost. Chris's mum died 6 months before I met him. His dad died 4 months after we got married. I'd already lost my dad a long time earlier. So we also had that very much like every day is here to be lived sort of mentality for the entirety of our marriage in any case. So this was just doubling down on that.
And it sounds like you did it proud. I'd like to just touch further on you losing your dad. Now, I understand you were 11 and meaning that your mum was, of course, widowed young. How did your experience, do you think, of childhood grief shape how you moved through grief as an adult and perhaps helped your children through?
Yes, Mum was 38 when my dad died, and witnessing everything that Mum went through definitely shaped a lot of how I viewed the world and talked about things. I've always been a big talker of death and dying and grief and stuff my entire life. To me, that's almost more normal than not. Everyone in my family seemed to die quite young, usually in clumps. So we got very, very good at those sort of conversations in our family. And
which is something most families don't talk about or haven't had the experience to enter the conversation.
Even when Chris was first diagnosed, most of the conversations that I think people have when they get something like a terminal diagnosis that they start having, we'd been having before we even got married.
Yeah, right.
Our entire marriage, we'd had those conversations, and sometimes you'd have conversations and other people would be around and you see people like looking at you weirdly, and it's just like one of us isn't planning on taking the other one out at any time. This is just, for me, it was always part of the natural conversation to talk about dying and, when you die, what do you want to have happen and where are we going to put you and what's that going to be look like for you. And
did you ever speak to your mum about how she coped and whether your experiences had brought you closer in kind of a different way because you shared that?
Oh, very much, Lee. Mum had a lot of sort of complex, my father's death as well. He'd had a heart condition. He was diagnosed at 37, told we don't know how much time you've got. The only solution was to have a heart transplant, which we weren't doing in Australia at that time. So he was in and out of hospital for 5 years before he passed. My mum was in hospital at the same time my dad was when he passed, having surgery. So there was a lot of complexities around her grief. She had some ongoing health issues after he died as well. And she didn't cope amazingly well with a lot of things at the time. And as a child, I was a little bit bitter about it. As an adult and having gone through it myself, I get it a lot more. And her and I have had some amazing conversations around those things. Mom says now, she goes, the only thing I'm jealous of is the fact, and she goes, it sounds really bad to say I'm jealous of this. I'm jealous of the fact that you found this great widow community. Watching you ladies and men support each other the way you do. Like, I only wished 40 odd years ago that there was something like that for me. So I'm sort of jealous of it. But, you know, we talk through a lot of different things about, again, you know, it's amazing having a parent that you can share this with, that, you know, how my thoughts, my feelings, what my life is looking like moving forward, choices I'm making, decisions I'm making, talking those things through it's been really invaluable.
Yeah, an incredible gift for mother and daughter to bond in that way, really.
Oh, definitely.
So do you feel that your experience, both as a child losing a parent, but as you say, others in your world around the time you were growing up, as well as those conversations, did that give you, do you think, tools or to sort of help you through? Yeah.
Definitely. And I think it's made it easier for me to support my kids losing their dad, because even my daughter will say, when she's having a really hard time, when you say, "You understand, Mum," I know that you actually do understand, that you've had these thoughts, that you've had these feelings, that you missed your dad the way I'm missing my dad. I acted out, you know, plenty of times because I didn't have the language to deal with my grief when I was younger. So at times when I've seen my kids do things, or they've snapped at me or done things, you know, there's a lot of grace there, because I know in my heart, my soul, they're just trying to process. They don't have necessarily everything that they want to be able to say, how they want to say it. So, you know, we lash out sometimes.
Yeah. And it's very powerful for you to be able to share something like that with your children, as awful as it is, and you wouldn't wish it upon anyone. But what would you say to a parent who is trying to help their child go through a loss, like many widows have, but they've not experienced it themselves? What sort of advice is there, or tips that can help?
I think it's just always important for the kids to know that you're there, and that they're loved, and that their thoughts and feelings are all valid, validating anything that they're thinking or saying, even validating the fact that I understand that your behaviour at the moment is not the behaviour that we would normally accept, but I also think that's because you're finding ways of working through this. So, you know, communication is always a really big thing, of sitting down and trying to talk it through. And sometimes when talking doesn't work, just sitting and holding someone can be enough. You know, just sitting with them and letting them rage. And as a parent, their safe spot has to be you. You know, if they're going through the biggest trauma of their lives at that point in time, they have to feel safe with you, that you're going to be accepting of, you know, what they're going through, their emotions, their outbursts. But it's also important to ensure that, I guess, things still run the way that's acceptable for your family too, you know.
It's a balance, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not a carte blanche of bad behaviour, but it's like, I understand what you're trying to do here, but we're going to work through these things. Yeah. We're going to hold these things. And sometimes it's just trying to listen to them, like let them talk out what they're trying to think or feel.
Some great thoughts, thank you. And what about yourself, carrying your own grief? So once Chris died and you were supporting your children, you obviously had the legacy of losing your dad so young. How did you manage your grief?
There was a lot of pre-grief, I guess. For me, I learned a long time ago about learning to sit with my grief. If I'm feeling it and I'm feeling it hard, you know, a good old shower scream always works well.
It really does.
Throwing things around a little bit. I always just doing it. And for me also, I was lucky enough to find First Light, I think 7 weeks after Chris died. and starting to connect with that widowed community made another big difference for me. You know, having an opportunity to talk to other people that also felt comfortable talking about it. They didn't shy away from the hard emotions and the hard feelings.
At the time for you, did you know any other young widows, aside from, sadly, your mother at the time, but anyone else that had been through this?
Yeah, I had a girlfriend I'd gone through school with that had lost her partner really suddenly when their girls were really little. I had grown up with my dad's cousin. She lost her husband when her children were 2 months old and 14 months old. So I'd grown up with quite a few younger widowed women in my parents' realm as well. There were actually quite a few in the extended family that also had been widowed with young children. So seeing younger widows wasn't all that different for me, I guess. You know, I feel like it really prepared me a lot better than other people that have never experienced any sort of deaths in their lives as well. Yeah.
And I guess that's partly why you're so passionate about having these conversations and making sure that talking about death is part of life.
It is. You know, there's, I'm thinking now, maybe 6 weeks ago, one of my colleagues at work lost her husband. And they have very small children. And the first thing that happened was one of her supervisors had texted me going, you know that widows thing you're part of? I've given her your phone number. I'm like, why have you given me the phone number? And she's like, oh, her husband died 3 days ago. And I'm just like, oh my God. For me, it's been a privilege to be that person that at any point in time, if she's having a crappy day or things are going on, every now and then she'll just sort of like give me a nod and everyone in the office knows, and we go off and we'll go for a walk and have a chat, and you know, it gives her an opportunity to debrief.
It's just having someone that knows, and like you said with your daughter, you understanding, like genuinely just understanding. Yeah.
Because some people say that they mean well, but they say the stupidest things that particularly I think early on either breaks you or makes you incredibly angry. As time goes on, you sit there and go, I know that they're doing the best they can and they're trying to be compassionate and empathetic, but they just don't get it, you know?
Yeah, and fair to say that, you know, had this not been our path, we also wouldn't, you know, like you put yourself in their shoes and go, oh, I don't know what I would be saying, or is it the right thing, or how many lasagnas do I bring over and how frequently?
Yeah, but there are all those things where you sit there and say, I know every time I meet another newly widowed person, it's just like, I really wish you weren't here, but I'm glad that you found us.
Oh, absolutely true. And you used a word before, privileged, and we often talk about words like being grateful and, you know, having learnt so much, and it all comes from an experience that we'd all rather never have gone through. Is that sort of an interesting sideline if you put, old you, BC and AC, before Chris and after Chris, next to each other? Yeah. That you kind of go, my gosh, who am I over here? Like this other person who uses these beautiful words in the aftermath of something so dark.
I remember very clearly the first time I went to one of the camp widows and I met Michelle Hernandez, because where the first camp was held was where we'd had Chris's memorial service 4 months earlier.
And I might just say Michelle is the founder of Soaring Spirits from the US, just for anyone who's not aware. Yep.
Yeah, and she created Camp Widow in the States that beautiful, beautiful women in Australia travelled to and brought back and have made such an amazing difference to so many people's lives. But I literally walked up the stairs to help volunteer in some setup, didn't even realise it was coming, saw the room and hit the floor. And Michelle scooped me up and we had the most beautiful conversation. You know, it's her just wanting to know all about Chris and her life and what was going on. And then it was about 16 months later when we had the next camp, and Michelle came back in and I saw her, big hugs, and she goes, I can't get over how much you've grown, you know. And I said to her, I've got something I need to tell you. I've actually found my passion in life. I've turned into one of these weird people, and my passion in life now is people with dead people. This is weirdly what brings me so much peace and so much joy.
Yeah.
You know, it's not one of those things as a little girl growing up, you go, one day I would like to help other people with this sort of thing, you know.
No.
And I've even looked into doing things like death doula work and other things like that, because it's just something that has literally become a big passion for me, to be able to help people that are actively dying and help their family and friends that are there with them before, during and after, because it is so life-changing. The person you were before is semi-erased, and we are those people that are reborn out of the ashes into something new and rediscovering who we are.
That's beautifully said. And it is such a gift, Jodi, to be able to do that for someone else. We spoke earlier about New Year's Eve, obviously that date that was so important for you and Chris. I just want to talk more broadly around anniversaries or milestone days, which may be big or may be small, depending on who you are and kind of how they've evolved in anyone's relationship. But for you, do you mark those days or plan for them, or just try and let them unfold naturally, keeping in mind you've obviously said that that changes over time, which of course it does?
Yeah. You know, we still celebrate Chris's birthday every year. That's really important for me. I usually spend time with the kids on the anniversary of his death, mainly just to sort of sit and remember and talk about him. But it's the smaller things sometimes rather than the big anniversaries that sideswipe you, you know.
Definitely.
When you've got a date coming up where it's like it's a birthday or a Christmas or a anniversary, they're things that you sort of like dread a little bit in the lead up. How am I going to feel? How am I going to wake up on that day? You know, I have with work always, since Chris has passed, taken his birthday and his death anniversary days off work, because I'm just like, I don't know if I'm going to feel like I want to people on those days. You know, some days I want to be around people. Yeah. One year on the anniversary of his passing, I went with another widowed girlfriend, and she took me down to northern New South Wales to her favourite beach, and we spent the day. The whales swam past, the dolphins came past, there was a turtle. We went swimming and got thrown around in the water like a washing machine. And it was so invigorating and so life-affirming, you know.
Yeah, and that was the right thing to do for then.
Yeah, on that year, I think that was sort of 2 years after he died, that was the perfect thing, the absolute perfect thing to do. So every year it seems to be something different. What would have been our last anniversary, like New Year's Eve, just gone. We would have been married 30 years. So that one I found very hard.
I can understand.
Just when you have those bigger number anniversaries. And we were always those people that we were going to be together forever. And, you know, you plan out like Chris was 5.5 years older than me, so he would always joke, I have to live to 106 so I can see your 100th birthday, and, you know, so we can both get our certificates from the Queen, you know, all this sort of thing, you know. It was always, you know, at our 20-year anniversary, we actually renewed our wedding vows because that was after he'd been diagnosed with cancer, and 6 months after he was diagnosed with cancer, I was also diagnosed with cancer. So,
Jodi,
2013 was not a great year for us.
No.
But so then our next big anniversary, I was like, you know, we're going to show you, world. We've gotten through these things. We're beating the odds. So we renewed our wedding vows again. Again, on a significant day, which happened to be the Australia Day long weekend. We just like to just add our own little twist on everything for everyone.
Didn't you just? I'd like to sort of revisit where you are now. And I meant to ask you this earlier. I knew you were going to become a grandma. Has that happened?
Yes, I have the most beautiful granddaughter ever born in this world.
Naturally.
Yes, she's just absolutely so beautiful. And it was one of the most joyous and the biggest soul-crushing things I think I've ever experienced, her birth. I went with my daughter. I was there for the entire birth, supporting her. And Chris, if anything, was more looking forward to being a grandfather than even being a father. That was like he'd never had grandparents himself. He was really looking forward to that. And so that's an important thing for us is Remy gets to grow up and be bombarded constantly with stories and photos and everything of this is who Grandpa is, you know.
Absolutely. And that's carrying his memory forward in the next generation, isn't it?
It is. And it's like one of those heartbreaking things when my daughter said to me recently how much it hurts her that he's not there to show and teach Remy the things that he showed her and taught her. That, this very significant person is missing.
There's so many moments through widowhood where there is so much joy and it's just balanced off almost equally with so much pain. Like moments like this, how do you navigate that?
A lot of deep breathing. A lot of deep breathing helps. Yeah. I'm a bit of a silver lining person. I always have been. And it's very much like being grateful that I had what I had. Yeah. Because the pain's only this big because the love was bigger.
Yeah.
And if you don't ever have the opportunity to love or be loved in that way, then this wouldn't hurt like this. So again, it's the pain's a blessing. It's a really weird blessing, but it's a blessing because it's a reminder that I was loved and I loved in that way. So
what part of Chris do you see living on in your children or in yourself and probably in your grandson as he gets older?
Well, my son is a spitting image of his father. Even people that have never met Chris, they've only seen him in photos, and when they meet Mackenzie, they look at him and go, oh my gosh. And he's now the same age his father was when we got married. So I just sit there and look at him and go, okay, wow.
How did we get here? My goodness.
Yeah, but everything that we wanted our kids to be, they've become. And so Chris is probably one of the kindest, ethical, moral, decent, upstanding people around. And both the kids are like that. Like they've got his warped, cheeky, sarcastic sense of humour and his kindness. He was a very hands-on, practical person, and he taught them all these practical skills. So every time you see them doing things, my daughter works in the building industry now, and she gets to boss around 50-year-old men on building sites and stuff. And I just sit there and watch her going, oh, your father'd be so proud. So proud. You learn so much. He'd be so proud of you. But you see so much good that's come of it. It's heartbreaking to see some of their the fears that they have for the future themselves.
Yeah.
They're very muchly both nervous as to what does longevity look like for them, having lost a parent younger. So, but for the most part, things are good.
You've said before that grief never really goes away, but it changes, and I think we can probably all identify with that. How would you describe your grief today?
It's like a very light shadow. It just sits there in the peripherals. Sometimes you catch it in the corner of your eye, but it's not like it was, I guess, in the first year, where you sort of go from being completely numb to being completely in pain and in this brain fog and not knowing which way's up. Now I feel like, I've got direction. I have hope. I have joy in my life. I have all the good things, and it just sits there to the side. Sometimes it does a little scare jump out at me that I'm not expecting. But for the most part, it's just something that I sit really comfortably with these days, that it's there, and if it wants to come up and we need to have a little cry or a sit down or a look through a photo album, listen to, certain songs, we'll do that. And then it sort of packs itself away for a little while and just sits there in the background.
Thank you for sharing that. I've been asking each guest 3 questions at the end of each of these interviews, so I'll ask you the same. You've mentioned anniversaries and milestones and how you remember Chris, but is there anything else that you do to remember him, just perhaps even something small?
I guess I just think about him every day regardless. There's not a day that goes by where I'm not having a conversation with him still. And because he was a builder and a carpenter, there's so many touches of him around the house. So, sometimes it's just sitting there touching things that he's made or done. It's just the little things these days that mean so much more.
And what's something that you would say to someone who's newly widowed, and maybe in the context of the chat that we've been having, perhaps someone who's facing their first anniversary or milestone?
What I usually say is sit with it, feel it, and know that there are people here that will hold you however you need to be held to help you get through it. But you need to learn to sit with it and feel it, because the only way to move forward is to move through.
And Jodi, finally, is there a quote that resonates with you most at this point in your life?
I'm the queen of the motivational quote. My daughter hates it. That's all I seem to do. Apparently I've turned into that woman on Facebook.
I love that you're that person.
Yeah. So there's probably 2 different things I really love. And one of them is, she was not powerful because she wasn't scared, but because she went on so strongly despite the fear.
Oh, wow, that's powerful.
Yeah. And the other one is a Maya Angelou one, which I love. It's like, I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it.
Wow. Thank you.
That's all right.
I really appreciate you sharing your story, telling us about Chris and also where you're at today. I know that whoever's listening will get a lot out of this conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you to all my guests for sharing their stories so generously. The Widow Diaries is hosted and produced by me, Caroline Winter from Pod Talk, for First Light Widowed Support, which provides information, resources and connection for young widowed people throughout Australia. Follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode, and you can also find out more information at firstlight.org.au. This podcast acknowledges and celebrates the traditional custodians of the land and waters on which stories have been told for thousands of years and on which this podcast is recorded.